Hey everyone! In this video, we're going to take a quick look at the Helium LoRaWAN network, including what it is and why you might be interested in it. Then I'll spend some time walking through my process for getting started with running a Helium hotspot. So first, let's take a quick look at what the purpose of the Helium network is. These days, it seems like everything and anything is internet enabled. From having all the different smart devices in our homes to now having smart devices outside like smart parking garages, smart parking meters, utilities and agriculture and sensors to collect data on practically everything. All of these different sensors and different things need some sort of method of connecting back to wherever they're reporting and storing their data. And especially for public infrastructure and that side of Internet of Things, it could be quite expensive to build out a whole huge network for, a wireless service provider to connect all of these things for you. And so the idea that Helium kind of proposes here is that instead of building out all of this infrastructure ourselves, what if we decided to do this in kind of like a crowdsourced, crowd-funded fashion? So what that ends up meaning is that Helium partners with a couple of other different manufacturers who build out different hotspot platforms that an individual can pick up and install and run themselves. And then that individual, for providing that network connectivity, gets rewarded for both providing coverage and transferring data from all of those Internet of Things devices. Now, the LoRaWAN wireless standard means that it's a low power and long range wireless standard to provide connectivity over very large areas of land. So we're talking that a lot of the hotspots that have been built out actually run on Raspberry Pis, so they're pretty small and low power. And because of the frequencies and antennas that are in use here, will actually cover great distances of many multiples of miles depending on the placement. And so it's pretty easy for an individual person, if they wanted to pick up one of these hotspots and get started with providing that coverage to quite a large area around their neighborhood. And so I've had the Helium website up on the screen for a little bit. If we do browse up to build and then down to hotspots, we can take a quick look at all of the different certified hotspot providers. There's quite a few of them here, and I actually ended up picking up one from SenseCap, which we'll get into a little bit later. But just know that if you're interested in getting into this, I would definitely recommend checking out the Helium website, because I'm sure this list changes ever so frequently when there are new providers added on. You also might notice that out of this list, most of them say LoRaWAN, but FreedomFi actually also advertises 5G. And it seems like at least for one hotspot provider, they're starting to test out what if we also did a distributed 5G cellular network, which I think could be really interesting to see as the Helium network kind of grows and expands into different technologies outside of just LoRaWAN. So the other thing you might be wondering about is, well, hey, wait a minute, didn't he mention a minute ago that I could get paid money for providing this wireless network access? And in fact, you can. So if we scroll down just a little bit further on the website here, we can look a little bit into how that works. And so by running this wireless hotspot, essentially what you're doing is, so let's take a parking meter as a garage or like a weather station or something like that that's IoT enabled. When that unit needs to be able to send communication back to whoever's monitoring it, it's going to broadcast out a packet on that wireless network. And if your hotspot picks it up, your hotspot does earn a portion of the data credits that whoever is running that Internet of Things devices has paid in order to get that data transfer. It's similar to if you have a cell phone and you pay your data plan per gig, the person who's running a lot of those different Internet of Things sensors is also paying a certain fee for the data that they're transferring over that network. And so by you running that hotspot and you're acting as a gateway from the LoRaWAN wireless networking side of things to the traditional internet, you do get paid a portion of that data transfer cost. Now, in addition to that, that's not the only way you get paid. You also get paid just for providing the coverage itself. So in my area right now, after running this for about 2 or 3 weeks so far, I don't actually have a lot of Internet of Things devices in the area that are using the network just yet, it doesn't seem like. But I am still getting some amount of credit just for being able to provide the coverage. And one of the reasons that I did decide to do this in my area right now is because there's only about a dozen other hotspots around me. And so the coverage is kind of sparse. So I figured it would be a good opportunity to get started and be able to provide some of that coverage. Now, as part of regular operation of the Helium network, what you'll see if you run one of these hotspots is that every so often, a hotspot can issue a challenge to another hotspot to say, hey, go ahead and verify your coverage and prove that you're actually active and other hotspots can hear you and you're actually providing the coverage that you say you are. And so your hotspot might receive that challenge, it'll broadcast it out, and then you'll see how many other different hotspots in the area are able to hear that response and record that, yes, you're online and you are providing the coverage that you say you are, and that the other hotspots are providing their coverage. And out of all of that, there is a small reward for completing those tasks. So at least for me, after running this for a couple of weeks, majority of the earnings that I've had are specifically just from providing network coverage and not even from network data transfer. So now you might be asking yourself, well, how can I find out whether or not there's a lot of coverage in my area already, and whether or not it would be worthwhile or even profitable or anything like that to run one of these hotspots? And the cool thing is that all of the Helium network information on all of the hotspots and transactions and all of these rewards and all of that is public information on the Helium Explorer. So if we jump over to that real quick, you can see on the main page that it shows how many hotspots are active right now. So there's almost 700,000 active right now. And as you can see on the map, unsurprisingly, most of them are concentrated either in the US or Europe. And so in my planning process to kind of decide whether or not it was worth running a hotspot on my own, I went in here and kind of looked around my local neighborhood to see what hotspots are running, what equipment they're running, and how much money that they've been making historically. So for example, let's go ahead and just zoom in. And I'll go ahead and pick a random hotspot in this area. And so in this specific area that I've selected, you can see that there are 4 hotspots, and we'll just go ahead and grab one real quick. And loading this up, you can see what the hotspot name is, what device it's running, what antenna it's running, how high off the ground it is. You can see whether or not the hotspot is synced, and you can also check what the earnings are. So for this one, over just the past 24 hours, it's earned just under $5. And on the right side, you can also even see which hotspots it's been connected to and have been able to witness the coverage beacons that it's put out. And so to get maybe a better example of kind of the area that I'm in, let's go grab one of these other hotspots over on the left side here that's in a bit more of a sparse area. And so again, if we click on this one, we can see that this one's running a Bobcat miner with a 4 dB antenna, and it looks like it's earning only a little bit over $1 over the past day. So the earnings are a little bit less good there. And so the purpose here is because all of this data is open and easy to access, it's super easy for you to take a look and see, okay, well, maybe, based on this position, it's not really worth spending the money on a hotspot and running this service and providing the electricity and the internet connectivity and all of that stuff when the earnings are only like $1 or $2 a day, and, maybe that's just not worth it to you. Now, beyond that, I also wanted to touch on what other tools and utilities are available to you. Especially because depending on how far you get into this, just buying a hotspot isn't necessarily the end of the road. You may also have to take a look at what type of antenna you want to buy and where you want to place it and what type of performance you might get out of a different antenna. Most of the hotspots that I've seen so far either don't come with an antenna or by default are going to come with a somewhat low power antenna and low range antenna, which is good if you live in a really densely packed city. But since I right now live kind of out in the middle of nowhere, where I'm surrounded by a lot of open areas and hills and that type of stuff, I wanted to get something that was going to be a little bit more powerful in order to make sure the signal reaches as far as it needs to and around obstacles and that type of thing. So I used a handful of different utilities to kind of try to test out what the coverage would look like, what antenna might work best, and figure out what would be the best to buy. So one of those tools is called HeliumVision. And this one does actually cost a small subscription fee per month. I think it's like $5 or something like that to get a couple of antenna simulations. I did end up actually just picking this up for just a single month, just so that I could run a couple of simulations with a couple of different antennas and placements and figure out where would be best to set all this up. And so for an example, let's just go ahead and pick a random spot. So we'll just go ahead and hit this. And then on the left side, we'll click on placements. Then we'll drop down under new simulation. And this is going to be where we can put in some of the details about our antenna and where we're placing it and the type of area that we live in. And then it'll run a simulation based on the topographical map data that it has to try to give you some sort of an estimate as to how far that signal will spread and what the patterns will kind of look like. So in this case, we'll go ahead and keep the simulation type as area. We'll set a label to test. I am in the US, so I'll keep the frequency at 915 megahertz. For simulation radius, I'll go ahead and keep this at the default, but I have run a couple of ones with a much wider range just to see how far the signal would spread. For height above ground, we'll just go ahead and set this to 3 meters for now. Typically, the higher you can get it up off the ground, and if you can get the antenna outdoors, is going to be the best case scenario. But we'll just say this is about 3 meters off the ground. We'll set the antenna gain to 5.8 dB, which is one of the antennas that I ended up testing out. And then for environment, you have a couple of different options based on what kind of environment you live in. And so for the purpose of this test, I'll just go ahead and pick one at random. And once we're done with all of that, we can just go ahead and hit Run Simulation. And again, this does cost 1 credit, and those credits you get from paying the subscription to HeliumVision. I think for 1 month, you get about 10 credits, so I was able to run a handful of simulations, which really helped me figure out which antenna I thought was going to be best for my situation. So after a couple of seconds, once this simulation is done, we'll get this nice little image on the screen, which can be a little bit hard to see and maybe interpret, but based on the little rendered circle of coverage, we can kind of see what our antenna pattern might look like. Obviously, the darker the green the color is, the stronger the signal is going to be and the closer to the hotspot, most likely. And then as we get further into the blues and the dark blues, the further away we get and the weaker that signal is going to be. This also does provide you the little range on the right side that shows what your likely witness is. And witness, again, is the other hotspots that can detect your beacons and pick up on your signal to prove that you are providing the coverage that you say you are. And so the hotspot that I ended up picking up with, I think, comes with a 2.6 dB antenna. And I tested a couple of these different situations with a 4 and a 5.8, and I think an 8. And mostly from running a lot of these different simulations and placements, the big thing that I walked away with was that for me, the 2.6 dB was going to provide okay coverage, but really not enough for the area that I'm in. Once I moved up to the 5.8 or the 8 dB antennas, it seemed like the differences between those two were a lot less intense. And so I decided to end up picking up a 5.8 dB antenna, which we'll take a look at in a little bit. Okay, with some of the planning figured out, let's just go ahead and take a look at the hotspot that I ended up picking up. I'll go ahead and open up the SenseCap website and we'll jump over to the hotspot page. And the first question you might have is, why did I decide on the SenseCap M1 as the hotspot that I was going to use? And the answer really just boils down to, it was the only one I could easily get within a couple of weeks. Most of the other hotspots that I did some research on had delivery times anywhere from 1 to 8 months out, whereas the SenseCap seemed to have some decent reviews at the time. And checking through some of the vendors that they sold their device through, it looked like I could get one shipped out within about a week or two. So that's kind of how I decided on picking out this one. That being said, since having it so far, I've had no complaints, no issues. So I guess that's as good of a recommendation as I can provide at this point. So on the product page too, it does show a little bit of an exploded view of the unit. And sure enough, again, this is definitely one of those units that's running on a Raspberry Pi 4. It does have a SD card already in it with their image and firmware already loaded on. And then it also has another card for that LoRaWAN wireless networking connectivity. So all of that is bundled into one box and all ready to go for you and ready to turn on and spin up. With that, let's go ahead and jump over to taking a quick look at the unit. So opening up the box, the first thing that you're going to see is the Getting Started card that's just going to show some quick steps for how to get this unit running as quickly as possible. We're going to walk through most of this here, so I'll just go ahead and put this off to the side. Next, looking at the contents of the box, the contents are actually going to be pretty light. We're going to have the antenna, which is included, and that's again the 2.6 dB antenna. We also have a USB-C power adapter. And then finally, we have the unit itself. And the design of this unit is going to be pretty simplistic. So on the front, all we see is a single air vent. Just the SenseCap logo on the top. And then on the back of it, we're going to have the antenna input, as well as a power button, a USB-C port for power, as well as a single Ethernet port. Now it is worth noting that this unit can be connected wirelessly, so if you don't have an Ethernet connection that you can run over to the unit, you could have it just connect to your wireless network and then stick the hotspot wherever you can. That being said, if it is at all possible, I would highly recommend that you use an Ethernet cable to have a stable and much faster connection to the device. Now, just for fun, I did end up partially disassembling this unit just to kind of show off the inside of it. The inside of it is very, very minimal. So on the right side, you can definitely see that we have that Raspberry Pi, and then on the left side, we just have that wireless networking unit with the antenna port. Outside of that, it seems like the only other real thing that they added onto this was a fan on top of the Raspberry Pi to help with cooling and thermals. Now, the way that I decided to set this up was that I was just going to use the included antenna for about a week or so just to go ahead and see what kind of coverage was provided with it before swapping to my other 5.8 dB antenna so that I could make some sort of comparison and measurement as to the performance differences. So we'll go ahead and attach the stock antenna now. And then we'll go ahead and get started with setting this unit up. So the first thing that we are going to do is we're going to go ahead and grab the Helium Hotspot app from your phone's app store. Once that's installed, we'll open it up and we will opt to create a new account. And because Helium is based on a blockchain network, as with all things crypto and blockchain related, we will get a series of 12 words which represent our cryptographic private key that are going to be used to create our wallet and hotspot storage. All of the hotspots are going to be tied to your wallet, as well as this is going to be where all of your rewards are paid out. So when you do create your account, make sure that you write down your 12 words and store them somewhere securely where you aren't going to lose them and no one else is going to be able to get to them, because this is the equivalent of your account username and password. If anyone else accesses this information, they're able to restore your Helium account to their device and make changes or take your money. The Helium app will prompt you to write down your 12 words, and again, it will remind you that they are not able to recover these. So if you ever lose your 12 words, you will be forced to recreate a new account and start over and potentially lose all of your money and hotspots that you had associated with your old wallet. And for any of you right now who might be screaming because I am sharing my 12 secret words on a YouTube video right now, don't worry, this is a wallet that I created just for the purposes of this video, and this is not the wallet that I actually use to store my hotspots. After viewing the 12 words and having an opportunity to write them down, the app will ask you to confirm those 12 words to ensure that you have them written down and stored somewhere. So we'll burn through that real quick. Okay, once we're done with that, we will be prompted to set up a PIN code to open the app with, which I'll do now. And finally, we can start adding our new hotspot. And so first, we'll go ahead and expand hotspots and click Add Hotspot. Next, we can search for our hotspot model either by typing it in, or I'll just go ahead and scroll down and find the SenseCap M1 in this list. After that, the app will show us a couple of quick tips on where and where not to place our device. I already know where I'm going to put mine, so I'm good. Next, we will have to consent to being able to provide diagnostic data. Next, we'll go ahead and be prompted to power up our hotspot. Now, the instructions that I'm given here are specific to the SenseCap M1 hotspot. So what we'll do first is I'll go ahead and plug in the Ethernet cable. Then we'll plug in the USB-C power, and we'll wait a bit for this thing to power online. So the first thing you'll notice is that the Ethernet port does light up first and seems like the device has power. Once the hotspot finishes booting up, we will see a blue light start to flash fairly quickly. And so going through the steps in the app, we'll then have to press and hold the button on the back of our hotspot for about 5 to 10 seconds until that blue light goes from a fast flashing to a slower flash. This means that the unit is now ready for that Bluetooth connection. So we'll hop back over to our app and hit scan for my hotspot, giving the app just a couple of seconds and it should pick up the new hotspot. And in just a couple of seconds, we do pick up our new hotspot, which is the SenseCap M1 that I have sitting next to me. We'll go ahead and select that for the hotspot that we want to connect to. Next, we'll be prompted to provide our networking credentials. So by default, it looks like it's going to prompt you to configure a wireless network for the hotspot. But all the way down at the bottom, there is the option to use Ethernet instead. And since that's the method that I have this connected, I'll go ahead and click that. Next, we're going to have to set the hotspot location. Now, the important thing to know about this step is that you're going to want to have your hotspot already in its final location when you set this up, because this is going to be the location that gets recorded and sent to the Helium network so that it knows where your hotspot is at. After the initial setup, if you want to change the location again, there is actually a fee to change the location, and I think it's a couple of bucks, so you'll want to make sure that when you do set this up, you have it in the right location to begin with. Or alternatively, you could click the button at the bottom that says no, set it up later and handle that. However, in my case, I do already have the hotspot in the correct location, so I'll just go ahead and hit ask for permission. And it looks like automatically the app picks up on my current location. And so I'll just go ahead and hit set location. Next, we'll be prompted to provide details on the antenna. Now again, for right now, I am using the stock antenna that came with the SenseCap M1, which is a 2.6 dB antenna. I will be swapping this out later, which I'll also mention does have a small fee associated for that change. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and leave it at the 2.6 dB just to go ahead and see what my earnings look like. I'll also go ahead and set the height to 2 meters, which is about where it's going to be at today. I might be able to move this later in the future, but at least for today, that's where I'm starting off with. And after we enter that, we'll go ahead and hit next. And as I had mentioned earlier, there is a $10 fee for claiming the location of your hotspot. And so most hotspot vendors are going to prepay this fee, as well as the fee for registering your hotspot. However, if you do need to change this later, you'll have to pay this fee yourself. So again, make sure that you have it in the right spot. I have mine exactly where I want it to be, so I'll just go ahead and click Register Hotspot. And then next we'll be taken to a screen where it just shows registering hotspot, says it's going to take a while and that we can just go ahead and jump to our wallet. During this process, while it's registering the hotspot, you can see that there are going to be 2 transactions that are sent to the Helium blockchain, one of which is adding the hotspot and registering it. The other one is going to be for asserting your location. In my experience, it took about 30 minutes for the hotspot transaction to be completed and the hotspot to be registered on the network. And then it took maybe about a total of 60 minutes for the location assertion to complete and my hotspot finally be able to be online. I'll also mention too that the first time I ran through this, if you try to add the hotspot and you get an error mentioning something about not being able to create the blockchain payload to add the hotspot, the issue here seems to be that your hotspot might need some time to update first. So what I would suggest in that point is make sure the hotspot is plugged into an Ethernet connection, has internet connectivity, and then give it about an hour or so just to pull down firmware updates and make sure it's up to date, and then go ahead and try again the process for adding the hotspot. Next, we'll showcase a couple of tools that I'm using to monitor my hotspot, the first of which is the SenseCap dashboard. And so you can go ahead and go to their website. I've already created an account, so I'll log in real quick. Now, even after those 2 transactions are completed, both the adding your hotspot to the blockchain as well as asserting your location, doesn't mean that your hotspot is going to be active and online and serving traffic just yet. It is going to take some time for the hotspot to fully sync with the network and be ready to go. And so one way we can check that is actually using the SenseCap dashboard, which will then pull data off of the hotspot and be able to provide you detailed information on the current status. So let's go ahead and add mine to the dashboard now. I'll go ahead and click Add a new hotspot. And there's 2 methods of doing this. One is going to be using the QR code that's automatically generated, which if you use this method, you're going to go ahead and just open up the Helium app, and in your wallet, you can scan a QR code, which will create that automatic link to the SenseCap dashboard and send them the information about your hotspot details. Alternatively, you can enter the details manually, in which case you'll find a lot of those details on the bottom of the hotspot itself. You'll have to provide information about the serial number and CPU ID and some different keys and stuff like that. Once that hotspot has been added to the SenseCap dashboard, I'll go ahead and click on it, and we can see the current status of the hotspot. So initially, there's not a whole lot here to see at this point in time. We can see that the blockchain is currently syncing, and we will have to wait until that completely syncs until our hotspot shows that it's online and ready to serve traffic. For me, it took probably about an hour before I saw in the SenseCap dashboard that my hotspot was fully synced and ready to go. But it did take probably another 48 full hours until the Helium Explorer dashboard said that my hotspot was done syncing and online. And so I do have a screenshot right here too of the SenseCap dashboard once the hotspot was fully online. So with all the setup and everything done, let's go ahead and jump over to what the earnings look like. After about the first week using that 2.6 dB stock antenna that came with the SenseCap M1, and after the full 48 hours for the SenseCap dashboard to start saying that it was fully synced, it looks like my earnings were averaging somewhere around $2.50 to $3 a day. And it looked like, based on some of the information I was able to pull, that I was witnessing 3 other hotspots in my area, and my beacons were being witnessed by 8 other hotspots. And so overall, not too bad. But I did end up picking up that 5.8 dB antenna, which I have a photo of here. I picked up that antenna and a short like half meter cable since I'm going to have the hotspot kind of right next to it. I also did pick up a PoE splitter, Since I have a power over Ethernet switch in my house already, figured it would be easy enough to use a PoE splitter, so I only have to run one Ethernet cable to the hotspot itself. The splitter will then split the power and the Ethernet off of that cable and be able to power the hotspot and provide internet connectivity to it. So when I do decide to move the hotspot a little bit later to a different location, if there's no power nearby, it's easy enough for me to just have to run that one cable. So it's worth noting too that the process to swap out the antenna is pretty quick. It's as easy as just shutting down the hotspot, unscrewing the old antenna, adding in the new antenna, powering the hotspot back on. You will then have to go into the Helium app and update your antenna configuration, which again I mentioned before does have a very, very small fee associated with it. I think it took about 10 minutes or so for that antenna change to take effect within the Hotspot app. The other thing to note is that if you do keep an eye on the SenseCap dashboard, the information that the SenseCap dashboard has in terms of what antenna is being used is pulled from the Helium Explorer. So there's no way to update the antenna configuration in the SenseCap dashboard. You'll just update it in the Helium app and that will propagate out to the SenseCap dashboard as well. So now with that, after changing out the antenna and running that again for about another week, out of the 13 hotspots in my area, I went from witnessing 3 of them to witnessing 6 or 7 of them. And instead of being witnessed by 8 of the 13, my beacons are being picked up by over 10 of them usually. And so what effect has that had on earnings? Well, again, I mentioned earlier that I was originally making about $2.50 to $3 a day with the 2.6 dB antenna. However, switching to the 5.8, I'm able to get better coverage and have more witnesses and all that fun stuff. So with the 5.8 dB, I'm actually just over doubling that, making anywhere from $5 to $10 a day in earnings, which overall is not a bad amount to be earning just for running this lightweight hotspot and providing connectivity to the area. One last thing that I wanted to call out was that if you do decide to run one of these things, I would also highly recommend you check out an app called HeliumBot.io. I use this to set up Discord notifications so that every time there's any sort of event that happens on my hotspot, whether it's a coverage challenge or beacons or a payment that's been sent to me and that type of stuff and the rewards, all of those notifications are then sent to me via Discord so I can keep an eye on what the hotspot is up to and how it is performing. So again, that is HeliumBot.io, and I would highly recommend you check that out for monitoring. So throughout this whole process, I kind of enjoyed a bit of diving deep into this whole project and learning a bit. And, while I am earning some amount of money off of this project, that wasn't my only goal in diving into it. I'm also just kind of interested in these decentralized infrastructure kind of projects and being able to join in on the community or crowdsourced infrastructure type of things. All that being said, I think that's about everything I wanted to cover in this video. I hope that this was helpful for you and maybe helps you figure out whether or not this is something that you might want to get into. Okay, and with that, thank you so much for watching.